This is the Nikon 135 f1.8s Plena. You've probably heard of this lens. It is absolutely gorgeous. It was lent to me by Nikon Canada. Thank you, Nikon Canada and Chris. And it's absolutely stunning. It costs more than my ZF. And it's kind of scary to walk around with it, to be honest, because I don't normally have this expensive of gear with me. I have it for another week, and I'm really excited to do some shoots with it. So we're gonna go over a quick initial impressions now that I've shot a couple things with it. And then we're going to jump into a little bit about planning your first sort of big photo project and what that looks like, and how I take some lessons from my previous life running businesses and apply them to what I'm doing here. So let's go. If you don't know me, my name is Chris Tayez. I'm a photographer and videographer based in Ontario, Canada. I mainly shoot portraits, events, weddings, basically people, which is great for a 135 lens because 135mm is like a classic focal length for portraits. To be honest, it's not like I've shot a ton of portraits at 135. It's not really my go-to focal length, but it is great for headshots and it is a classic. And you know, there's kind of no better way to put a lens through a ringer, as far as I'm concerned with what I do, than a wedding, which I got to shoot this past weekend using this lens. Now, you're not gonna see a ton of images because I was a second photographer, and just out of respect for Liam and his process, I won't show a lot of those images until after the gallery has been sent. But I'll show you a few, and I can give you my initial impressions on this lens, which are that it's amazing. I can't really say anything bad about it yet because I haven't found anything bad because I haven't shot with it long enough. 82mm filter thread is probably the one frustrating thing, only because I don't have any 82mm filters, but I don't really plan on using a filter for something like this anyway, so maybe that doesn't really matter. The construction is obviously phenomenal. The sharpness is incredible. F1.8 at 135 is like a super dreamy, bokeh-licious lens. If that's what you want to shoot, stop down, it's incredibly sharp. It's not very heavy. I mean, it's heavy. It's not light, but it's actually lighter than the 50mm f1.2, which I thought was interesting. And it's definitely lighter than the 85mm f1.2. It's pretty comfy in the hand. On the Z6 III, it felt really good. I was totally comfortable using it with the Z6 III all day long. I didn't have it on the camera the entire day, but a lot of the day, and it felt totally comfortable. I did put it on the ZF just to see, and to be honest, it was a bit heavy. It didn't feel the most comfortable. Now, I do have the extra grip on the ZF, so that makes it more comfortable, but I probably wouldn't want to spend a whole day with the ZF and this big boy. And that would go with like the 50-1.2 or the 85-1.2, any of those. Quick note that any of the photos you're seeing here have been edited using my presets for Nikon. You can find them on my website. They're cheap, they're cheerful, and they work really well. You get 3 presets. You get my standard Nikon preset, you get my, I just gave you the finger, you get my film preset, and then you get a black and white preset. And those all work really nicely in a number of different scenarios. They won't affect your white balance or your exposure. They'll affect all the other stuff. And you can use those to just have some fun and see what you can do. Okay, back to the video. So I'm really excited. I think it's a great lens. It optically performs really well. The autofocus was great. It was really fun to be shooting a wedding with a different focal length than I normally use because it just changes your brain a little bit, which is good. It just makes you question things and think about things a little bit differently, which I really appreciate. So a great lens. I'm really excited to start working with it more this next week. And then unfortunately, I do have to send it back. Am I going to buy this lens? No. Only because I cannot justify spending that much money on a focal length that I just don't use enough. But man, it's really, really nice. It's really nice. So if Nikon wants to give me it, I'll say yes. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be cool. So that's the Nikon 135. Just a quick little update on what I'm shooting with right now. But the meat of this video is going to be all about planning your first kind of larger photo project and what that looks like and how to do it. So for anyone who doesn't know, I've been shooting photos for a very long time, but before I was shooting professionally, I owned a couple of coffee shops. That was my main thing. I worked in the coffee industry for years and years and years, and that's what I did. Owning a coffee shop was amazing and difficult and incredible and frustrating and all the things you think about running a small business. One of the things it really did for me was give me the opportunity to really learn how to set up a business. And whether I did it right, whether I did it wrong, I definitely learned a lot. And I think when I'm thinking about going to do my first big photo project, I decided I wanted to approach it in the same way that I would approach starting a new business. So that means creating almost like a business plan for the photography project. And doing it this way, call it pre-production, call it like, you know, a business plan, call it whatever you want. It is really helpful to kind of isolate what you're hoping to achieve and really get down to kind of brass tacks of what you want. What I want to do is take you through a little bit of what I've thought about when it comes to creating my new photo project. Name untitled at the moment, but it will have a name eventually, probably closer to the end of the project. And it's going to be a pretty big, long project, something that I'm going to work on for quite a while. So it will be peppered into everything that I do over the next few years when you're looking at my YouTube. And I'm pretty excited about it. But I'm going to go over just a few of those things. So I'm planning something like a coffee shop, for example. You create a business plan where you would go over your budget, you go over your timeline, you go over like your estimated revenue and costs and all of that kind of stuff. We're going to leave a bit of that to the side, but some of those things we are going to do. And the first thing we're going to do is come up with a mission, vision, values statement. If you haven't heard of that before, it's a very helpful thing that businesses do to help get really down to the nitty-gritty of what they're trying to achieve with their business and how they're going to achieve it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go over my photo project here, and I'm going to give you a mission, vision, values statement for my photo project, and maybe that'll give you some inspiration for yours. So the mission statement outlines the organization's purpose and how it will achieve its goals. So in the case of a photo project, here it is, right here. It's written down, it's on paper, to photograph the Latino-Canadian culture across Canada, specifically documenting the differences between new immigrants and first-generation peoples versus second and third generation in different areas across Canada. Now, why does this matter to me? Why am I interested in this? I come from a Latino background. My father was born in the United States, but he was of Mexican descent, and I've always felt a really strong connection to that side of who I am. However, in Canada, it's not super well represented. We have a big Latino culture here, but it's not nearly as accessible or as vibrant as it is down in the States when you're going through like Texas, Arizona, California, those areas. And that's actually what I think is really interesting, because that question of how do you hold on to your culture in a place where it's not easily accessible and when it's not as obvious. I think that's a kind of fascinating dilemma, and it's something I really want to explore. And attached to that mission statement is a time frame. And if you're starting a business, it's really important to have a time frame. So let's say you do want to open a coffee shop, for example. When do you want to be open ideally? Well, that's going to have to do with permits. That's going to have to do with getting building materials, getting a contractor, getting all that stuff sorted. But generally speaking, you're going to have a window where maybe your landlord's going to give you 4 free months of rent to get open. Well, that's your time frame to get open, hopefully, because after that you start losing money. So my time frame for this, I want this to take between 2 and 5 years. Basically, if I get to the end of 1 year and I'm like, I'm done, it probably means that I didn't put as much effort or as focus into it. And if I get to 5 years and I feel like I don't have nearly enough images or I haven't told the story I want to tell, it probably means I didn't put enough effort into it. So I'm giving myself this kind of big window of saying I will not publish this as a final work in less than 2 years. And ideally, I will not publish it if it takes more than 5 years. So I have that window to play with. Next is a vision statement. Now, mission and vision, they sound really similar, and they kind of are, but the difference is that a vision statement basically, it paints a picture of what the organization hopes to become in the future. At the end of this all, what would it look like? What would it feel like? What would I hope comes out of this project? What is my vision for not just like the specifics of it, but the cultural impact and stuff like that. So here's what I have for you. This is my vision for my project. At the end of the project, I'll have deepened my connection to the Latino culture that I was a part of, but not really fully raised in. I'll have brought light to the culture and opened people's eyes to it in Canada, because I think that it is sorely lacking. And I will allow for people in the culture to feel represented, to feel seen, to feel validated, and to look at it and feel like they see themselves in it. They might not see themselves in every single photo, but I want them to be able to look through that project and say, like, this captures a part of my childhood, a part of who I am now, a part of what it means to be, Latino in Canada. I also plan to release this as a photo book, as well as hopefully have it shown in some kind of exhibition at some, I don't want to say huge gallery, but like a larger gallery in Canada, potentially the opportunity to travel it. Who knows? I have big ambitions for it, but the work itself obviously needs to stand on its own in order to do that. But that's the hope, that's the vision. So we have our mission, we have our vision, and that's all really, really great. Where do we go from here? Well, The last part of that is values, and values are super important because if you don't have values surrounding your business, then you are going to make a bunch of decisions that don't make any sense together. You're going to do things that don't feel right, that don't feel good, and it's going to be harder to know what to do. So when we apply that to a photo project, think of it like your values are kind of at the core of when you decide to take a photo, whether or not that is the right photo to take. So here's my values for this project. All photographs must have consent, whether that's verbal or written, insofar as I will not take a photo if somebody doesn't want me to take a photo. If I go to lift up my camera and somebody says, hey, no, 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 then I won't. I might talk to them, I might engage them, ask them if it's okay, try and get them comfortable with it, but I will not take or publish a photograph of somebody who has explicitly said, no, don't take my photograph. Even if it's technically legal to do so because they're in a public place or whatever, I don't want that because I don't want that contention in my work. Secondly, I want to go into any of the communities that I'm photographing and I want to make sure that they know why I'm there and that they know that I'm there as somebody who is trying to represent the culture, not just take away from it. I want people to know where my roots lie and my sort of feelings surrounding the work. And I don't want them to just feel like it's extractive because there's way too much of that when people are dealing with other cultures, and that's not what I'm interested in. I am not necessarily a part of that culture because I wasn't raised in it as closely as a lot of these people would have been. However, it is an important part of my heritage, and I want them to know that it's coming from a really pure and honest place. And finally, not leaning into unnecessary stereotypes. That's a big one. So it would be really easy here in Canada to mostly photograph things like migrant workers, or maybe you go for the more obvious stuff, like you look at some of the like Chicano culture that has made its way up into Canada, whether that's like, you know, like lowriders, whether that's like certain types of music, certain types of looks, clothing, all that kind of stuff. To me, it's not that I don't want to photograph those things. It's just I don't want to show them just for the sake of showing that stereotype. Like if I'm going to photograph migrant workers, I want to do it because I'm getting to know these migrant workers and I am trying to show some humanity within that and show all sides of it, not just like how terrible it is to be a migrant worker. Because a lot of them actually, you know, do enjoy the process of being up here in Canada. They appreciate what they can get out of it. It's more complicated than we think. And so I want to lean into that complexity, but not into the stereotypes and the obvious stuff. So we've talked about mission, vision, values. We've talked about our timeline. The next thing is talk about budget, because if you're starting a coffee shop, if you're starting a business, or if you're doing a photo project, you have to decide how much money, time, effort you're going to be willing to invest into this. So we know our time. We know that the effort is going to be there, but the budget is the big thing. So how much money do I realistically want to spend on this project? That's a question of a few different things. We can talk about gear. Now, I don't really need to spend money on gear because I have pretty much all the gear I want. I do want to shoot some of this on film, so I do have to think about how much of it I am going to spend on film. I know for sure that I want to try and make this into a photo book, so there's some costs there. I know that if I want to get things framed, if I want to put it up in a gallery, there's some costs there. So that's all something that I have to be aware of. And then there's the cost of things like travel, the cost of things like hotels and food and all this stuff when I am traveling to make this happen. I've looked at this project and I've basically said to myself, over a 5-year period, if this project costs me $10,000, so $2,000 a year to make this happen, I'm comfortable with that. If there's an opportunity to get grants, if there's an opportunity to get some funding for this project in order to be able to do something that feels really compelling, then I will look into that too. This is about like how much money I personally want to spend versus how much money I'm willing to spend of, I don't know, grant money. I'll spend all the grant money I can get, but I would be okay with walking away from this project all in, having spent $10,000 if it's the kind of project that really speaks to what I want my photography to be in the long term. I don't think it has to cost that much. I think it could cost a quarter of that. But I do think it's important to be aware that there are costs associated with doing a photo project like this, and I need to be comfortable with that. So I have to kind of look through all the things that I'm doing and kind of put it through the lens of that budget and say to myself, is this sustainable? Because if every time I want to go to a shoot, it's costing me $1,000 and I'm going to want to do 50 shoots over the period of 5 years, obviously that is, you know, way, way more than I can possibly spend. So that's something I need to be aware of and something that will be kind of a guiding light for me. After that, I want to think about two things that are kind of together, which is locations and inspiration. So locations That's very hard to determine because there are Latin communities all over Canada. And really, it just comes down to the ones that I can find access to through people I know, that I can get access to through time spent. But I do want to photograph across Canada. I don't want it to just be in this small area that I live in. I don't want it to just be Toronto. I don't want it to just be Vancouver. I want it to be, across Canada, so I create a really consistent narrative. And that kind of leads to the inspiration. So, where am I getting the inspiration from? Whether it's things like other photographers or movies or books or anything like that is one side of it. But the other side of inspiration is like cultural stuff, like actually getting out and getting to know more communities in the Latino community itself here in Canada, so that I can start to build connections. And people can say to me, like, oh, well, I know this guy who knows this guy who knows this woman who can get you in touch with this person. And that's how this kind of goes. So, inspiration for me is going to come less out of like being inspired by other photographs, and it's going to come a lot more out of being inspired by time spent with other people. So I hope this was interesting and illuminating for you. If you're working on a photo project, maybe going through this mission, vision, values, budget, timeline, location scouting, inspiration, all that kind of stuff is going to help you get more clear. And then you can go from there and start using some programs, whether it's like Millinode or Pinterest or whatever you have to do to create your cohesive structure. And I'm going to keep you posted on how things are going with this throughout. I wanted to put it out there as I started working on it because I just think it's fun to talk about this kind of stuff, and hopefully some other people are thinking about projects like this too, and we can connect. So I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for watching, and peace.